Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and I am excited to have you with us today. Before we jump in, don't forget to check us out at themfgconnector.com and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're into finding real world solutions to your challenges, be sure to head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Manufacturing Connector. That's where we dive deep into the tools, technology, and strategies making an impact in this industry. Now, today's guest has a story about hard work, curiosity, and hands on experience. Jacob Hermosillo started, like many in the industry, sweeping the floors of a machine shop at 17. But what sets Jacob apart is how he turned that entry level job into a 2-decade career, mastering some of the most complex CNC machining processes in aerospace. He's worked his way up from running machines to managing 9-axis CNC mill turns, and today he's a process engineer focused on pushing the boundaries of what's possible in this industry. In this episode, we're going to get into the details of Jacob's journey, how he combined traditional machining skills with cutting edge technology to drive process improvements at a major aerospace corporation. We'll also talk about his passion for high performance cars and motorsports and how that fuels his creativity and approach to engineering. Jacob's perspective is practical and grounded in real world experience, and he's got some great insights for anyone who's interested in CNC machining or just curious about how to make continuous improvements in their work. So, whether you're a shop floor veteran or just getting started in manufacturing, this conversation will offer something valuable for everyone. Let's dive in. Hello, Jacob, or Jake, I guess, as your screen says. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Work is over. Playtime starts. I'm here with Jim Mayer. It's good.
Awesome. Awesome. I should introduce you to Chris Lukey, who does the manufacturing happy hour, and then you can drink while you're having these kind of conversations. But that's a different show. That's not my show.
So he's just taking it up a notch, huh?
Yeah, he's the OG when it comes to manufacturing podcasts. So, as I start with every guest, tell us your story. Right, you've had an amazing journey. Started at a shop at 17. Take us back to those early days. What was it like stepping onto the floor for the first time? And then what motivated to keep you here? What's kept you in this industry for so long?
So my grandmother was a machinist. My father was a machinist. So my machine shop journey really started when I was in, I don't know, third grade, fourth grade. I wanted to make some extra money, and machines always leak oil. So I'd push around this 55-gallon drum of cat litter, and I would sprinkle it on the floor, and I would make my rounds. I'd come back and sweep it up when it was all soaked up, and that's how my machine shop journey started. And just looking at all the machines, I didn't have no clue what they were doing. But they were loud, and they were obnoxious, and they were smelt weird, and it was awesome. And just knowing like my father and talking to him and how intelligent he was, and seeing what was coming off of those machines was just intrigued me. And I got a little bit older, and I was kind of not doing so well in high school, and I got kicked out into a continuation school. That continuation school is 3 hours a day. It was like 8 to 11. and then I still wasn't going to that, right? So they called me in the office and they're like, what's going on with you? Like, this is 3 hours. You show up and you pass. That's all there is to it. You got no homework, nothing. And I just, just didn't appreciate the way that they were treating people in public school. And the principal said, well, we got this welding program at the junior college. You'll go there 2 days a week. It'll be the whole day, and they just treat you like any normal adult. So I went over there and I did the welding, and back then I was just really wanting to build cars. So I focused heavy on the fabrication. I took in every design and fabrication class that I could there. And at the time, the state of California, if you passed your core classes, they would pay for your vocational training. So they called it like the Modesto Technical School. I would do 3 hours of high school, and then the rest of the day, sometimes I'd be there 12 hours a day, uh, doing science, math, English, and then all the welding and all the fabrication I could possibly squeeze in. And I got a job there, 16 and a half at the time, as a teaching assistant for the welding department. So I would do like all the TIG welding demos. The instructor was kind of shaky, so he wasn't too good at the TIG welding demos. And I would like cut metal and just help people learn how to weld. And I got out of there and I messed around in fabrication for a few months and decided that was hot, heavy, and dirty. So I got an opportunity to come out to Arizona and work in my father's shop, where I stayed for maybe 6 months working for him, CNC machining. He had like a couple older Fadals, 4-axis, a handful of lathes, and they were renting a corner of a guy's shop.
Okay.
And that guy came to me and asked me if I wanted to start working for him, and I made the move, quit my dad's shop, and went work for this guy. And he was an older gentleman, and I mean in his 80s.
Wow.
Which was fantastic because he would do things like bring me a box of drills and tell me to resharpen them. And I didn't know anything, right? I'm just like this kid. And I said, well, which drill do you need first? You know, what size do you need first? And he says, I don't need any of them, but you need all of them. So try and then bring it to me and I'll tell you how you screwed it up. And
All right.
so just went through that process. And one day I went and asked him if he would sponsor my trip to a Mastercam class at Gateway. And he said, you know, you don't know how to program by hand. Why would I ever pay you to learn how to program with a computer? You know, you're going to go and you're going to figure out how to screw it up on the computer, and you're not going to know how to fix it when it hits the machine. Okay. So then he gave me a Fennec programming manual and a hand-drawn sketch. And he says, well, you're running this lathe and this saw. Write out this program using that book and that picture and bring it to me, and I'll show you how you screwed it up.
Wow.
So it went from sweeping floors, delivering parts, sharpening drills, learning how to program by hand. And these lathes were like old TBI NC chuckers, modified tape-fed machines,
Wow.
flatbed, no internal tool counters, no decimal points, no man-readables, and they didn't have any setup sheets. It was like a genuine shop of machinists. So what you would do is you would take your print and you'd look at the fillet call out and you'd back figure the program to see what it was sweeping in that fillet, to see what radius insert you needed. It was far more complex than I thought it was at the time, right? And now I get to Amphenol and we have tool lists for everything, internal part numbers for everything. You can't possibly grab the wrong tool. But back then it was much different. So at that shop, I worked for years until the economy fell apart in Arizona. And I left because he was looking to lay somebody off or massively cut hours.
Mhm.
So I had a job opportunity making medical parts in California, so I took off for a few years, 2.5 years, I think. And then he called me back one day when I was on lunch and said, hey, I'm looking to sell the company and like your help with a transfer. So I was supposed to come back and do 1 year with him. That was his contract was 12 months, and then I was going to take off and go find something else. But we lost a lot of our older guys at that shop to retirement. So my responsibility level just kept climbing. I went from machinist to programmer, and then to lead programmer, and then to shop manager, and
Wow.
then to engineer, just because people kept falling off. And then there was nobody left to do it. So then I ended up quoting, learning how to do ROI analysis and
Wow.
all that fun business stuff. And in these meetings with Honeywell's quality department, and I just really enjoyed all the responsibilities and that wide variety of tasks. Because machining was getting kind of like just standing in front of the machine. It was a job shop, so at least it wasn't like thousands of pieces. So we were in and out of setups, sometimes 2 or 3 a day.
Wow.
But it was still getting kind of boring by that point. I
Yeah.
was a decade in already, so you could only run enough so many parts before it kind of gets all the problems are the same, and especially if you've looped these parts over and over again, right? So that engineering side really opened up this whole can of worms, right? And then I just became a learn it all
Mm.
at that point where things became so difficult that I was really stressing out. And I just would work all day and I would learn all night. I did CAM instructor, Master CAM University. I just chipped away at it. I've got tooling U certs up the yin. It's wild. And Tooling U is a great platform for anybody who wants to learn. It's
Yeah.
like $70 a month, unlimited
Yep.
classes, and my company sponsored it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what I would do is I would turn in a certificate for every $70.
Oh,
So if I knocked out 3 or 4 certificates, well, they thought it was $70 a class. It was fantastic. At that point, COVID hit,
mm,
and I was just looking for a break.
yeah.
So I took a year and a half off, and then I came back to machining, making really awesome, like large aircraft firearm assemblies. We're like 17% nickel margining steel, crazy expensive, crazy hard. And then Amphenol called. So I came out here and I talked to Amphenol. And once I met Rich, I was willing to make the move because I felt like I was limited. I was pegging out on the learning capability at the previous shop.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to Rich Rice, I believe you've met him.
Oh, yeah.
Just a wildly intelligent older gentleman.
Super
So,
smart and just super passionate too. Rich is a great guy.
and mellow, right? So he's the engineering department boss, and I couldn't imagine a better pick
Yeah.
for a leader for my department than him. So I made the move, and here the delta was this is $1 billion machine shop with massive production. So the time savings adds up quickly, and my passion for continuous improvement. I'm just like, I mean, I could spend 12 months in here and figure it out and then just pick all that stuff apart. And that's exactly what I did.
That's awesome.
And Amphenol's been great as far as training. I think it was the second weekend I was in Esprit training, and I did the Esprit training for a week, paid. They've sent me to Japan for Nakamura applications training, out to Esprit headquarters in California to do a 1 week training one-on-one. We brought the Esprit guys here to do a training with our guys for another week. It's just nonstop learning with Amphenol.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Jake, in that story, when did you realize that machining, manufacturing was more than a job? It was your like future, your career path. Was there any like defining moment?
There definitely was. I would say that 5 years, 6 years in, it came to a point where I was really debating. It's high stress
Yeah.
uh, to like load a pallet of 48 parts and hit that button and come back and like, is it right? Well, are they going to be good parts? And not fully understanding in that 5 or 6 years, I was at that point where like I felt like I probably knew everything. And then I
Mm.
was just like, I would screw these little simple things up. And back then I didn't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect was, right? Like, so I didn't realize that, yeah, you really know nothing at 5 years, 6 years. But once I opened up to the idea that I really didn't know what I was talking about, that's when I decided that specifically machining was going to be a winning ticket for my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. So, what do you think, looking back to those early years and outside of the Dunning Kruger moment 5 years in, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced coming up through this industry? I mean, you've had a lot of different roles here. You've experienced a lot more than your average machinist. So were there any like challenges that stuck out to you?
The challenges, for the most part, aren't so much those black and white things. The mathematics is not, we can learn that.
Sure.
Navigating the people was the most difficult thing.
Mm,
And growing up with those really hard-earned machinists,
yeah.
those guys with their lab coat and their cigarettes sticking out of their mouth and their bad attitudes and their dungeons, that was the most difficult part. Especially started managing a shop in my mid-20s. So when I'm managing people who are in their 50s and have been doing this forever, that tends to clash just long enough for you to prove yourself, right? Like you're either going to prove yourself or they leave, right? I think that's the most difficult part for me so far. And now I'm joining the ranks of those elderly gentlemen.
You still have a lot less gray in your beard than I do, man.
Working on it. Luckily, Amphenol is fairly low stress job, so it's not accelerating too bad.
So let's dive into that a little bit deeper. What were there any lessons or, challenges, or I don't even know what the right word is, but what you drew from those experiences working with some of those older heads? How has that helped shape the way you do lead different generations? Because you and I met, full transparency to the listeners or viewers of this, you and I met through a leadership development class. Had I known part of your history here, I probably would have just stepped aside and let you teach the damn thing. So how has those early experiences with the different generations shaped that leadership journey for you?
Well, it definitely taught me that to be flexible
Mm.
in the way you talk, the wording, to be flexible and not so sensitive to the incoming. And a lot of it just comes back to like the dichotomy of control. Like there's only so much that I can control, and his opinion is not one of those things. If it's a black and white subject, well, we can do some math and we could do some A/B testing to maybe prove that your case is right or maybe my case is right. But when it comes to their opinion or their personality, we don't control that. But we do have control of the one thing, which is our response and our reaction to whatever is going on there. So, and being a listener, right? So let me hear what you have to say. Like, I would bring people into meetings that had conflicting points of view that I knew were going to be kind of hot headed just so I can get that and they can see that I do value their conflicting view. Does that make sense?
100%, Bill. 100%. And I mean, that to me just means that you're you're taking that methodology of continuous improvement, continuous learning, and you're taking it even through your leadership journey and your interpersonal journey too. Does that make sense?
It does. And I feel that to my core. I didn't know when I was younger, what you call it
Right.
or really how to monopolize on it, but it's always been there,
That's awesome.
right? That search for improvement and like the car thing falls right into that, right? You're
Yeah.
at the every bit of that mechanical object has to fall in line with itself.
Yeah.
And there's an improvement to everything, but then everything that gets improved, you'll find the next weak link.
Mm,
And then you just go down the line and then you just repeat, right?
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So over the 20 years that you've been in this industry, what has been the most striking or uh, major evolution that you've seen both on the technology side but also on the people side, and how have you adapted to that?
On the technology side, it's definitely going to revolve around automation. I didn't think that the mill turn would come down in price so quickly as it did. I thought that that was going to be like this top bar thing that only these huge OEMs that had tons of money could really afford. But man, for 350, $500,000, that's a whole lot of capability in your shop, that can really reduce your cycle times and part handling. I mean, we make some of the wildest parts in 12 minutes completely deburred, you know, and everybody else can do the same thing. It
So
isn't.
do you think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but do you think that that kind of technology can help democratize the industry a little bit so that small to medium sized job shops can start competing with some of these larger organizations?
Absolutely. And I don't think that you need that $350,000, $500,000 wild mill turn machine. It really depends on your part, but when you look at it, we were at IMTS together not too long ago, and Tormach had their setup out on the machine floor. 1500, that's a BT30, 4 horsepower, 6 max, with a robotic arm
Wow.
integrated into their also open source technology.
Really?
For 70 grand, you can get a mist collector, a robotic arm, the mill, some work holding, some tooling. I mean,
I've
you
said
get
it
you.
before. I've said it before on here. I'm going to say it again. If anybody listening is thinking about going out and getting a loan for a college degree, go out, get a loan for 70K, get a machine like that, get some knowledge on how to run it, go to Xometry and start printing money for yourself. Upgrade your your electrical system at your mom's house in the garage and start printing money.
Dude, and that thing rips, and it's a 220 single phase, right? So
Is
you just
that it?
unplug your dryer and plug in the damn Tormach and hit it, and run lights, a lights out situation. It's full probing.
Wow. That's
They
amazing.
really got it put together, I think. Their whole machine now, that 1500, is fully North American built. No
That's
more
cool.
castings from Taiwan. So if you're buying from them, you're supporting the open source, which I love. They've got source coding. They've got their PCBs. You can get online and find every diagram, every print, every bit of source code.
Wow.
And they're just really like the Haas Mini Mill was the that minimum barrier for a
Yep.
while, right? Or like an older Fadal. Now
Yep.
you can get a new machine with a warranty, with automation, and that automation is going to be the ticket.
Wow.
CAM programming is not going to last very much longer for shops that have a decent cash flow to them. Um, AI is going to take that over for the
Okay.
most part. I don't know if it's going to be like Chat GPT AI or if it's just going to be basic logic. Like we started an initiative here that I've been working for the last 10 months with Hexagon
Okay,
uh,
cool.
to basically do that, right? Drop a model, give me G code, done.
Really?
So that aspect of the trade isn't going to last much longer, like the guy turning handles. But the job's not going away, it's shifting. What I see, the machinist of the future is going to be somebody who understands machining, somebody who understands materials, geometry, and automation, robotics. Right? So you focus on the automation integration. And that integration is also getting easier. You see like the cobots coming out, the UR cobots, like press this button, build a waypoint,
Yeah.
there it is, and then fine tune it. It's no longer writing like extensive programs for Fennec robotic arms, which was the problem with that whole um, automation ecosystem, right? It was a complexity of how it all fell together and how difficult it was to integrate those things into your controller. I set up a shop for a guy a couple of years ago that we bought a Haas VF2SS and an STY30 and one UR15. And he was my only coworker for a long time. And I just built stations for him to work the mill and a station for him to work the lathe. and I would just swap them, and I'd be programming and designing
Wow.
while he was swapping parts out. And it was just the easiest thing to do. And the UR and the Haas, they have this seamless integration, and you could buy the whole thing as a kit, And now Haas has their own line of robotic arms, and I imagine that that's even easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up IMTS. One of the coolest things I saw was the convergent manufacturing platform that they had at the Emerging Technology Center there, right at the entrance to the North Hall, where they had the pallet system, they had the Kuma, they had the Lincoln Welder, they had the metrology system, they had everything in one cell. And their hypothesis is that you can upskill one person to run that entire convergent manufacturing cell in the next 5 to 7 years, so that you can have one person who understands automation, to your point, understands automation, understands machining basics, understands welding basics, understands metrology basics, to the point where they can program that robot to do everything that typically it would have taken 4 to 5 people to do, which to me is just astronomical, man.
Yeah, and this is how we compete, right? So to be competitive in the world marketplace using US dollars, we have to be much more innovative.
Yeah.
And taking lessons from the Japanese is the way to really do it. They're so far ahead of the game out there.
Yeah.
It's just the same way, like you said. There will be 6 machines of partial assembly going on in a cell, and just one guy. They've got in-process checking, post-process checking. They just really got it put together out there, well thought out, because they had to, right? The
Exactly.
necessity is the mother of all invention,
Yep.
and that's it. But I feel like a lot of people fear the automation and the artificial intelligence. And if you fear it, well, that's a good sign that you should probably skill up.
Mm.
If you don't fear it, it means you're probably embracing it and you've already skilled up and you know in which direction you need to go, right? But so many companies sponsor so much learning. And like the Tooling You program at $70 a month, what employer is really going to deny that $70 and you want to get more intelligent to help me make more money? And the other thing is that if you as an employee look at your facility, your job, like if that was your money, what would you do with it? Or if that was your time, what would you do with it? I think that point makes people stand out a lot more. So then if you're standing out and you're thinking about the workplace like that, and then you go ask for that education, you're really going to get it. You can get a massive amount of knowledge without paying a dime. All you have to do is put in the time effort.
Absolutely. So, is that what you have seen as the biggest change on the people side? We talked about the technology side. What's the biggest change that you've seen on the people side of manufacturing over your 20 years?
The biggest difference I've seen is age. I would say that my average age of an employee here, out of our 124 manufacturing employees, I would say it's in the upper 20s.
Wow.
Like we're not even pushing 30s.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, that age, I did not see that coming, right?
No.
I figured we were just going to lose people until there was like 12 of us holding our hands out like, yeah, you're going to pay me $1 million a year. And it's not so much the case. Here we've got guys that'll come in. One of my best setup guys right now was laying tile 12 months ago.
Really?
So if you need to identify those people who are the learners, right? The learn-it-alls. If you can identify the people who are going home and learning and then give them your time, that rate of information gain is phenomenal.
That's awesome. Cool. That could be your quote of the episode, man. So let's talk about culture. It's called the Manufacturing Culture Podcast for a reason. What does culture mean to you in our context?
Culture to me means fostering an environment in which accountability, technical excellence takes place in the pursuit of continuous improvement for the betterment of each employee there.
Awesome.
We're gonna make your job safer. We're gonna make it easier. We're gonna make it less backbreaking. I do a lot of stuff outside of work with my guys
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible because I'm on the other side of the wall. And I feel like so many shops, they have this huge disconnect of the engineering team and the manufacturing team.
Absolutely.
And I do my best to break that down. And I want to be out there with you. I want you that it's not us against you, that we're doing this together, and that all that negative feedback that you give us really helps. I do once a quarter, I bring people in to discuss common problems that they see from the process team, whether that be in programming or tool callouts or whatever. There's stuff that we're repeating at these mistakes that we're unaware of, right? If nobody comes and tells us, or you tell the wrong process guy, because he's not going to care. So I pull the team together and then I just let the manufacturing team on one side just lay it all out and be
That's
open
awesome.
and honest. And we have a shared OneNote where team leads and supervisors can just drop their suggestions or the things that they see that are commonly wrong, and then we'll address those issues in that same meeting. And we 100% of the time we come out with a better process.
Got it. So along those lines, how has the culture of the industry and the culture of the organizations that you've worked for formed and shaped the career that you have today?
Well, I think I owe a lot to the older folks that I worked with in those dungeons with 8-foot ceilings. You know, we're cutting nitronic 60 and cutting oil and everything's just dripping. I feel like I owe a lot to them, not only for the information given, but the attitudes perceived and knowing that those dungeons really did exist. They were there and we're not there anymore. A lot of the shops that I go into now, I toured Timney Triggers not too long ago. I don't know if you've been out there.
Yeah. Great
Very
shop.
clean, very
Yeah.
automated, just an amazing amount of work gets through that shop with a handful of people. I mean, it's pretty wild. And the key factor is people being included into that fuss and being part of it, driving your culture around that and driving your culture around meaning. Gino Wickman wrote a book called Traction, the entrepreneurial operating system. And I believe heavily in that philosophy of vision driving process, right? I don't know if that was a ramble or answered your question.
Hey, there are no such things as a wrong answer on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. They're your answer and it's your truth. And that's why I ask these questions, right? Because I'm learning as much about you as everybody else is right now. And I've known you for 8 months or 9 months or a year or whatever it's been, right? So I love this. Jake, you and I have talked quite a bit about that next generation of machinists, next generation that's coming up. And you have a passion for passing on your knowledge. What is that driver trade, this career at the forefront of young people's minds, and how do you keep that spirit of curiosity alive for that next generation?
Well, I love the trade, right? Its complexities are intriguing.
Yeah.
So, from the love of the trade, of course, I want it to continue. As far as passing the information down to the younger generation, it's the fact that so many people in my past have held those like trade secrets so close, right? They wouldn't help you because they didn't want you taking their job. I mean, and for me, you can take my job, man. That means I did a real good job. That's fantastic. And I don't fear that I'll lose my job. I'll more likely to be brought up in the company if that's the case. And I want to give my time to those people who are willing to learn on their time. And I feel like that's a fair exchange. I just genuinely want to give back in exchange for all the people who have given in my direction, right? I met a lot of really intelligent people on the way to where I'm at right now. And one day somebody will say that same thing about me.
That's awesome. I love that, man. You're full of great sound bites today, Jake. I love it, man. This is perfect. So one thing that I didn't know about you, and we haven't talked about yet, is this love for motorsports and cars, autos. Talk to us about this love. I mean, where did it come from, and what's your favorite type of racing, and what do you do with all of it now?
So I grew up, my mother's side of the family was dirt track car owners. So I would be hanging out at the dirt track on the weekends, just smelling these things going by and just loud and obnoxious and fireballs coming out all over the place and crashes. It was just awesome. And then when I started driving, it was the adrenaline of it all, right? And I've just had this passion for cars my entire life.
Wow.
I assume it came from the brainwashing of my parents. And I'm not upset about that, right? Because if I spend all my money on stupid cars, it means I can't do anything dumber than that. Uh, Currently, I daily drive a 750 horsepower car.
Do you really?
Yeah, that's where all my money goes.
What do you
All,
drive?
it's a Mustang.
Damn.
It's fairly obnoxious. My neighbors are always asking me when I'm going to sell it. I leave at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah, I bet they love you.
Yeah, so it's just genuine race car sounds at 4:30 in the morning. But I chose a neighborhood without an HOA for a reason. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome,
yeah,
man.
and for me, it's all about road racing, right? Like the NASCAR thing is cool, and the speed is cool, and turning in one direction is not all that cool. But for me, a lot of it is the engineerings, right? So I like the Daytona Prototype Series, and like you can watch those races and you can understand and know what cars are going to be doing in 10 years,
Yeah,
right? All that technology is being developed there to be used out on the roads. That's what intrigues me about it, the suspension geometry. That's why I like the road racing is because it's all over the place. It's up, down. It's got everything.
that's awesome. I think I brought it up when we were in doing the cohort. I love F1, and I love F1 for a lot of those same reasons, right? There's the engineering. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into F1. I know that, right? But the engineering that comes with it, the how do we make this faster and lighter and easier to drive? The whole sport just calls to me. I love it.
Yeah, did you see the car that Hexagon had in their booth at IMTS?
Yeah,
So that thing is wild. So that thing will generate 4,000 pounds of downforce at 0 miles an hour.
which is
It's got
awesome.
a fan under it that just
Yeah,
sucks it to the ground. And there's the wild amount of 3D printed parts that car is made of.
yeah,
It's insane, and that is, it's a scary world for cars in the future, right? Like
absolutely.
they'll let you go buy 1,000 horsepower and drive it off the lot. I don't know what they're thinking, but I like it.
Yeah. Well, in the right hands, that's fun technology, right? In the wrong hands, it's just a weapon.
Yeah, and we'll see what my hands look like. I don't know.
Did you race in the Hexagon simulator?
I did not. I was awfully busy.
Okay.
I had 2 days to find a whole lot.
All right. Well, as far as I was told, I held the fastest time for the week at 30.3 seconds in that car. And I have been known to make a big deal out of wins before, and here I am making a big deal out of a win. Uh, I just loved it, man. Don't use a brake; just pull your foot off the pedal and then mash it back down. That's racing.
Yes, it's like I go to Octane often. I'm never the best, but it is fun, and I
I
don't
have a
use the I
blast.
don't use the brake a whole lot.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I am a huskier middle-aged gentleman, and so physics are is not on my side to like be the best racer in person. But those simulators, man, I'll crush them all day.
There's definitely a weight to power ratio there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Physics. It's not for
Physics.
everybody, but we are bound to it.
Exactly. So I've got a couple more questions, but one that I neglected to ask you at the top of the episode here. You mentioned your familial history in this industry. And you are the first one that talked to me about their grandmother being a machinist. Talk
Yes.
which to me is cool as shit, man. Like that's freaking awesome. Talk to me about how her experience was. I mean, it wasn't recently, I'm sure, but talk to me about her experience as a machinist and what she shared with you about her journey.
So she grew up very poor, California, and they ended up scraping enough money together to get a Bridgeport. And I forget who it was, her brother maybe. And they just loaded up. Back then there was only manual machines, right? And they would make these little trinkets, and she's always laughing at me for talking about like the work holding and stuff. And she's like, Mihal, we would hold those stack of parts and we would just throw that tap through there. Nani, all 10 fingers, you see, like trying to keep it that way too. I was telling her about a problem I was having with a burr coming through this, like, it was like 30 thou thick, 300 series stainless. And she's like, you just clamp it with like a piece of a shirt and it'll take care of that burr on the backside. It won't be so big. Oh, what are you talking? I don't think I can get away with clamping in a shirt for every part that I make. But so that's kind of like her experience, right? It's very like dingy, hardcore machinist stuff.
Yeah.
And she likes to make fun of you for doing all this automated stuff all the time.
Do you
I
think
go to her.
that that lends to your patience, I guess, with the older heads in the industry? I mean, coming from such a familial background in the industry?
I feel like my nanny, especially when she was younger, was a very hard earned person. That bred my father to be a very hard earned person. My father's got zero patience. When I started working for him, I was making this like softball size part that had four nubs that were coming off of it, and it was just clocking in a fourth axis, and it was just stroking with a ball end mill, just doing all these color passes, and I'm looking up the screen, man, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell is going on. This code is just flying all over the place, and I didn't know what G code was. I'm like 3 days into the job, and I got this dimension that's out, and I'm like, hey, I don't know what this is about, but this pin that you said should go in there, it is not. And I don't have time to babysit your ass. You need to figure this shit out. Okay, 36 hours. I guess I'll figure it out. And he's like that guy you don't want to ask twice, right?
Yeah,
So it's like, okay,
absolutely.
book it is, I guess. And it was a Fadal, so they have like a great help manual, right? So I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. You can move these tools around. That does make sense. But that definitely gave me the patience. I feel like that training of this is what the reaction from one side is like. Can't really do anything about that. Sure, but I still firmly believe in that dichotomy of control. I always have, right? There's like the one thing you can control and a whole bunch of stuff you can't. And I think happiness lies in that understanding what those things aren't,
Sure.
right? Like we can't do anything about the weather. We can't do anything about the tide. We can't do anything about people's opinions of us. We have this circle of influence and we have this circle of concern. And anything that's outside of those two circles should be left alone.
I love it.
So I feel like that's where a lot of my patience comes from, is that I get it. And I understand that you're angry. And I understand that I can't do anything about what you're currently saying to me. But when you're done and I've listened and I've processed how I think you're feeling, we could probably address a lot of these issues in a much more mellow way that makes you walk away pretty happy
Yeah.
about the conversation as opposed to storming out.
Yeah. Jacob, what's next for you in your career? I mean, you've had a good 20 years. You've learned a lot. You've dealt with many generations. You're only just getting started, man. What's next for you?
Well, I feel like for the current moment, Phenol, they have a lot of resources
Yeah.
that I could take advantage of, a lot of money to play around with. And I'm going to use it to lean this place out and scale it through the business segments,
Awesome.
preferably. We have 106,000 employees all over the
Amazing.
place. So you could imagine what a minute apart does spread around the world.
Yeah.
And I want to find those little spots. And Amphenol has the means to deploy almost any idea that you have that can have a decent return. I mean, if it's something that's less than 12 months return, they're pretty keen on doing it.
Awesome. Man, that's huge. Sounds like the dream spot.
For me, it really is. You know, there's goals that I have, but I do prefer to more move in silence.
Yeah, I get it. I get it, man. So, last question. What haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
The one thing that I want to share with anybody watching this, whether you're old or young, is to just become a learn-it-all. You know, we everybody knows the know-it-all guy, right? But that the learn-it-alls are much more rare and much more valuable.
Yeah.
If you're curious about something, go down that rabbit hole. Take a class. There's no better investment that you can make than in yourself
Yeah.
with both your time and your money. Because both forms of investment, they are going to yield more money in return. And maybe it's not money that comes back, but maybe you get it done faster. So you can do something else with your time, because that's the one finite resource that we have, right? It's the one thing that never comes back. So we're in a river of time and we only stand in the same water once.
It's another good one. I like that.
Got that from a Bruce Lee book.
All right. All hail Bruce Lee, man. Well, Jake, I really enjoyed this. You and I have been talking about this for a while. I'm really glad we did this. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're a wealth of information and just super calming energy. So appreciate you being on.
I appreciate you, Jim. Thanks for everything. Thanks for the knowledge from the class. Thanks for the help at IMTS. I
Absolutely, man.
appreciate you, and we'll be talking more.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's a wrap. And I hope all of you took away the same things I did, eh, and that his mastery is built on dedication and adaptability, and really that passion for pushing boundaries in this industry. He went from sweeping floors to becoming a leader, going back into machining, and now leading machining and process innovation. And so to me, what I take away is that your story, it's not about where you start, but where your curiosity and your hard work can ultimately take you. I love how Jacob blends that traditional craftsmanship with cutting edge technology and a knowledge of that cutting edge technology. And that represents to me how manufacturing is evolving right before our very eyes, because it's all about that traditional craftsmanship and being a maker and taking that technology and blending it all together. I also loved how Jacob has this passion for all the generations, right? A lot of us talk about next generation. Jacob's passion isn't just towards that next generation. It's also soaking in the knowledge of previous generations. And it really just is amazing how collaboration and knowledge sharing is just as important as sharing the knowledge is to the next generation. So, Jacob, again, thank you so much for sharing your story and those insights today. Of course, I wish the best for you. I appreciate you. You're an awesome dude. To our listeners, thanks again for tuning in. If you found today's episode as valuable and inspiring as I did, I hope you take a moment to reflect on what part of Jacob's journey resonated with you the most. Is it the continuous learning? Is it that pursuit of precision? Or maybe it's that importance of fostering that workplace culture? But whatever it is, let's keep talking. Check us out on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Write down what you connected with. Also, go to the manufacturingconnector.com, the mfgconnector.com for more content, resources, and other ways to engage. If you're looking for practical solutions to your toughest challenges, head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Manufacturing Connector. It's packed with insights that can help you move that needle at work. Also, please share this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your grandma, Jacob's grandma, and then rate and review the show on whatever podcast platform you listen to your shows on. Your feedback helps us continue to bring more stories like this. And every time you rate and review, it rockets us up the charts so more people find us, so we can continue to do this, because I love doing this. So thanks again for joining us on this journey. Stay tuned for our next episode. And in the meantime, keep learning, keep pushing boundaries, and stay connected to the culture of manufacturing. We'll see you next time on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast.